afternoon, Daniel. How are you?
Not too bad, pal. Sorry, I was running a few minutes late.
No worries, no worries. Good. Oh, yeah, anytime that you can spare is much appreciated anyways.
No problem at all, no problem. Yeah, sorry, just things overrun a little bit. So, how are things with you?
Yeah, they're great. Just obviously still trying to do the same as you, kind of by the looks of it, like adapting to working from home and just trying to do a bunch of things as well. So, but I'm good. What about yourself?
Well, alright. Like, just, keeping pretty busy. There's always quite a lot to do, and been doing quite a few of these Zoom calls, as I'm sure you have over the last 2 or 3 months. But yeah, it's all alright. All good.
Fantastic. So, like I said, I'd love to get started anyways. So for anyone that's listening, can you give like a brief intro of who you are and what you do?
I ask myself that a lot sometimes. So the short answer is that I'm a football lawyer, and I haven't always been a football lawyer. I worked in lots of different industries and sectors, is the truth. But even within the football law and sports law sphere, I consider myself, as I've mentioned maybe previously in other podcasts and such, a contracts lawyer, an intellectual property lawyer, a dispute lawyer, a reputation management lawyer, a solutions finder. So it can vary between the sexy side of saying I'm a football or sports lawyer, and the run of the mill side saying I'm a commercial contracts drafter, which probably doesn't sound quite as cool.
So open with the first one majority of the time then. So what I think was very interesting about you as well, which I don't know entirely much about the whole law industry, but do many lawyers write books, and especially do many lawyers write books about football?
Well, the backstory really is that I've always liked and loved writing, even when I was a student and an undergrad, writing in law journals and such, when I did my master's degree in competition law and football broadcasting rights. And it sort of just developed from there, whereas then I started a blog the best part of 15 years ago on my website, and wrote on lots of different topics, if it was transfers and financial fair play and third-party investment and bonuses and disputes and whatever else it might be. And I remember just one day, one of the journalists that I worked quite closely with, that I'd always chat to, had said, well, why don't you just convert all of your blogs into a sort of book compendium? The short answer then to the journey that then happened was I got introduced to my current book agent, David Luxton, who was pretty, in a nice way, brutal, which was, it needs to be something pretty much stand out from what is already in the sports space, because there are so many football books and so many sports books. So how are you going to try and do something which is, offers a slightly different perspective? So, that took a while to try and put a proposal together and to write it once I'd got the okay to do it. But it was a pretty enjoyable and satisfying experience, if not a very, very time-consuming one as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's great. I've written a book. Sometimes pinch yourself just to say it, but it's great that generally people have been pretty nice about it and have said good things to me. And now the job is to try and write a second edition to update it maybe in the next couple of years, which is going to be quite a task as well.
Fantastic. Well, it seems like there's going to probably be a lot to talk about as well, especially with the aspect of COVID-19 as well, and how this is impacting football contracts. Because from my research and my understanding is that football contracts are quite unique, as they're not obviously generally like your general work contracts. They've been built on like a unique precedent, and specifically in the industry. And so how is COVID-19 kind of changing this then? Is it going to have a long-term impact on football contracts?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think there's a number of things. I think, as you can already see, even though there aren't specific provisions in playing contracts to cover for coronavirus, a lot of clubs consulting with their players and the agents have asked for wage deferrals, for wage reductions more generally over a shorter or longer period of time. And generally that has occurred at a bilateral level rather than at a league level, which was initially considered to maybe occur And then you've got the relationships between the broadcasters and the leagues, whereby even though the Premier League has restarted, it's likely that the delay in the season finishing is going to cost the Premier League clubs over £300 million by way of rebates to its global broadcast partners. And then you obviously have the slightly different relationship, which is between then the clubs and its commercial partners and brands. And if that's the fans, if it's their front of shirt, if it's the apparel make, if it's the corporate sponsors in stadium, if it's the advertising hoardings, etc., all of those relationships have been tested because for a while there was no ability to be able to exploit and to adhere to the contractual provisions that were that had been entered into. So it's immeasurably changed the sporting landscape. You only have to look to Ligue 1 in France, where the season was effectively finished, the same as Belgium and other leagues where they've done their best to try and continue the season, because the financial ramifications would have been pretty dire if they hadn't been.
It's an interesting point that you speak about there on broadcasting aspect, because technically the clubs are still back playing. Technically, there are actually more games on TV than there would be before. Obviously, there's not the atmosphere and there's not everything that's the same about it. How is this 300 million calculated? What is the percentage of what it is? It's quite interesting that they obviously choosing a specific figure of what they deserve to get back.
Yeah, well, and I'm not privy to what the Premier League's contract would have been with its different global broadcasters, but it was reported that because there were particular provisions that effectively meant the delay in broadcasting the remaining games of the season, that then those broadcasters were entitled to a particular rebate because of that delay, even though the season is continuing on now and there are more games. There's also an argument which says because some of those games are being broadcast free to air effectively, that has diluted the broadcasters' exclusivity, which is obviously what they want to try and ensure, which is the games aren't available anywhere else. You have to subscribe to those particular channels and platforms to be able to watch those games. So I think the broadcasters, under probably some governmental pressure, at least accepted the rules of the game for the remainder of this season. But again, it will be interesting when the season restarts, probably some point in September, to see how those broadcasts are going to be provided for, whether some games are still going to be broadcast free to air, either on the BBC or through the Sky Pick channels or otherwise, and what the value of those broadcasting rights for that season might be, because it seems unlikely at the moment that too many people are going to be going back to watching football live in the stadiums anytime soon. And if that's the case, then more games can be broadcast, live over those various platforms, and there may be, value to the broadcasters and the leagues in doing it that way.
It's crazy how they're trying to kind of move forward, and with everything surrounding the pandemic, and no one really knows what's going to happen. Is this a little bit of an incentive for the Premier League to look at building their own streaming service to publish directly to fans? Like, I've done a little bit of research into this, and it's very all generalised figures, but on average they get $3 billion per season now from their broadcasters. And for example, if you say the Premier League charges £10 a month, gets about 200 million subscribers, that $3 billion on average jumps to $24 billion. Now, this is a very generalised version. Is this, and obviously it takes probably someone a bit brave, whoever the chief executives of the Premier League, to make that push. But with the bigger profit intakes come in, and this aspect of having to pay back, is it up there for Premier League the Premier League to think maybe we could do this ourselves?
Well, they can decide however they want to decide in the end. Agreed. And it's something I've written about at length previously, even 8 or 9, 10 years ago on those type of subjects, with those sort of Prem flicks or the equivalent that it would be. I think the thing that needs to be taken into account is it's not an easy jump to go from rights holder, i.e. the seller of rights, to another entity, to the rights holder, the exploiter, the distributor, the marketeer, the consumer-facing brand that effectively that they outsource to broadcasters in exchange for a large sum of money. So again, a £9 billion 3-year deal, $3 billion per year, as you mentioned, sounds small change in comparison to what the subscriptions could be for a global product that could be streamed over Premier League TV OTT channel. But the infrastructure that would be needed on a national basis across the globe to be able to invest in the sales, marketing, and other channels necessary to market, exploit, subscribe, cater, deal with ongoing issues, and have that consumer-facing element, which at the moment, as I mentioned, the broadcasters generally deal with, would be a pretty monumental task, is the truth. Now, whether the Premier League do this in increments is maybe something that might be open to, where it's not like they are doing it in the UK maybe in the next tender round, but to leave that option at least open, but instead decide to do it for maybe a couple of smaller global markets, in particular territories around the world, to be able to test out that particular model. There's certainly something that could be said for doing it that way, but I think a general leap into the global sphere for a Premier League B2C or direct-to-consumer offering would be a pretty big leap to take at one go. And I would say that if it is going to happen, it would probably be more of an incremental stage rather than all or nothing.
That makes a lot of sense, to be fair. It's like you said, it's especially having the infrastructure there. From the Premier League has their own TV channel, so there's some minor things there, but we see even one of the big tech giants coming in, like Amazon, and making that push forward for them to kind of do it bit by bit. It seems like it could be very more incremental, and maybe testing some different areas around the world, and then fully establishing it. It's quite interesting to see how it could come about. One thing I do actually like to ask you is obviously something that you're kind of more directly involved with, is how difficult is it to negotiate a football contract? We've heard a few of the demand sides from players, and Neymar springs to mind, and agents, but how difficult is it to negotiate a contract with football clubs?
Well, again, the short answer is that because usually I work in parallel with agents, is that I probably don't tend to see 90% of the negotiation and the difficulty and the hard work in getting a deal to a stage where actually then the agent is asking me, the lawyer, to be able to help with the final elements of the deal. Because by that stage, it's likely that the commercial deal has more or less been negotiated, i.e. how much the player is going to earn, his bonus requirements, buyout or release clauses, relegation clauses, particular bonuses, image rights deals, all of that type of stuff in terms of commercials and valuation would have more or less been carried out. And what my role really is to ensure that the way that the deal is structured, how particular clauses are drafted, compliance with the regulations, how the agent's fees will be paid, particular requirements in terms of the club's obligations to pay the agents in a particular way. Those are the types of minutiae that I will tend to get involved with. But the truth is that I won't usually see probably 80 to 90% of the actual underlying negotiation that's been required. Firstly, because I'm not an agent and that's not what I do day to day. But secondly, because ultimately the agent will probably have had to develop long-term relationships with the club executives, have to be able to pick up the phone on a probably daily, monthly, weekly basis to be able to understand the needs of that club. And then when things align, the agent's interests align with that of the club to either sell a player or to buy a player or to find alternatives or to do things in certain ways. Only when that alignment happens and things are quite far down the line do I then get involved in those type of matters.
Fair enough. One thing I saw from your Google talk that you did was the fact that the difference of how clubs are now instigating essentially the employment contract and the image rights contract. which is a very interesting way of how they're doing it. Essentially, they are. You'd like to explain it a little bit better because obviously you're the expert in this.
Yeah, of course. Well, the primary reason now why clubs see a large amount of value in the off-field image exploitation of one of their players is because of the great expansion in the commercial partnerships that are available between club and brand and partner, really. And what clubs are very keen to do is ensure that as much as they are paying the players for their on-field talent, i.e. training and playing and scoring and winning and doing as best as they can on the pitch, that there is really an inherent value in that player's brand image, image to exploit, opportunities to appear alongside particular partners and endorse them in particular club contexts. There is a real value that those clubs want to try and control. And that means effectively that the clubs are willing to pay a proportion of the total remuneration that a player may receive to a player's image rights company to be able to best exploit that player's off-field reach, is the truth. How recognisable that player is, how much added value that player's image will attach to the club, to the club's partners, to appearances that they may make, to community projects or charity matters that they're dealing with at the same time. And as a result, then, the inherent value is in being able to do all those positive things, but also for the club to control the player and the player's image rights company, effectively not to endorse particular brands that might be in competition with the club's partners as well. So there isn't that mix of commercial message. So, it's very common for the top maybe 7 or 8 Premier League clubs at least to have image rights agreements with a number of their players' image rights companies, so that they can best exploit and manage their relationships with the image rights company, and also to be able to tell partners or would-be partners, these are the rights that you would be able to have as partners of the club, which may well include particular exploitation rights for the image rights of those particular players too.
That's crazy how it's just all evolved so much, especially in recent times. Right, well, thank you for coming on. I know you've got to get off, but it's always been really interesting to hear about your work. One last question I have for you, for anyone that's listening, I ask this to everyone. If you could give one bit of advice to anyone about anything, what would it be?
Oh dear, you put me on the spot now. But I guess a lot of people are asking me about how you get into the sports industry, for example, and I've done some YouTube courses on that, etc. And if it was just how to get a job in sport, the thing that I always try and emphasize to people wanting to, because they want to mix their passion with their day job in a way, is counterintuitively, don't worry in the short term about getting a job in sport. The thing that I'm beginning to realise more and more is that what actually sets any person apart in a particular industry is their skill set. So if it's their skill set as being a top podcaster, top marketeer, very good on social media, a lawyer, an accountant, a particular skilled profession, it's usually those underlying skills mixed with industry know-how, knowledge, practicalities are what will usually get you far in that particular industry. So all I would say is don't be too despondent if you want to find a job in sport and it's not immediately available. Open yourself more widely to a career across different sectors. It's the same as I did as a lawyer. I was working in all different sectors, from financial services to aviation to automotive sectors to agriculture to food, supplements, etc. But ultimately, all of that experience in law gave me a great understanding about this type of legal concepts that have been very important for me to understand now that I'm working more in the sports and football space. So one piece of advice, short answer now, is concentrate on the skills and don't be too demoralised if you can't find that job in sports in the short term. Because if you're passionate and want to learn and develop and keep with the process, you'll be able to find that job in the medium to long term if you keep on doing the right things.
Fantastic, that's a great bit of advice. Now I imagine that could be applied quite a wide range of people that have got them really ambitious dream jobs that are very hard to get into. Thank you very much for your time today, Daniel. It's been great to hear about a bit more insight in the industry, and thank you.
Pleasure. Speak soon. Thanks for your
time. Speak to you soon. Cheers. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to subscribe and share, and give the show a 5-star rating on all the podcast apps. Thank you.